So, welcome everybody. I'm Kendell Geers. This is the first MC Art Matters. It's a little project that I run here at TheMerode, which really poses the question about why art matters. I mean, it seems simple enough, but no, it's not. I will begin by giving some context or justification why I pose this question today, which is, and you know, Koyo is currently residing in Cape Town. At some point we will discuss her...
In your country. In
my country. The country of my skull, as I like to call it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But not far from Cape Town, there's a little cave called Blombos Cave, in which is the oldest known work of art made by a human being, estimated 75,000 years old. Now, Blombos Cave, this is extraordinary. Long before Lascaux, long before Altamira, long before any of these, long before Chauvet, human beings had the need to make art. Now, this poses an interesting question. Before we had writing, before we had language, before we had cities, before we had villages, before we had anything, we made art. It's always been there with us. It's always been part of, and in fact, I would go so far as to say it is not our ability to speak or write that makes us human. It is our ability to make art that makes us human, that distinguishes us from animals. And in fact, it is art that is the definition of humanity. Now, I know this is something that you share because, in fact, you have made some very incredible statements which I'd like to ask you to speak about, where you speak about, you feel privileged to be from a continent that created humanity. But then you said something else interesting. You said, without being religious, I'm religiously dedicated to artists. Could you speak about that?
Well, first of all, bonsoir, guten Abend, good evening. Thank you, TheMerode. Thank you, the audience, of being here, taking the time out of your precious schedules to be here and listen to Kendell and I having our kitchen table conversation. You're just here to listen in, basically. So,
Why does art matter? Why do you think we make art?
I believe that there are some fundamentals in us being human, and that, like fundamentals, they don't move. And one of those I strongly always come back to is that we are made of objects and scriptures. So our capacity to make objects, beginning from ancient times, as we were becoming the sapiens that we are today, making tools, making, objects, and our capacity to imagine and conceptualize writing language. So this will never change. We will always make objects and we will make scriptures. And that is what I think makes us human, because we are the only species who has that capacity to do that. Now, art is, I believe, another realm of this making. And I really insist on making. And not writing and talking, it's really making. Using your hands, your body, your everything to create something that serves your community, that serves, all realms of perceptions that we live in. So seen from that perspective, and if you look at the evolution of humanity, everything began in Africa. Full stop.
We'll come back to that, certainly. Now, of course, I mean, I think we have a full house. I mean, it's an incredible, and congratulations on being appointed to the next Venice Biennial director. I mean, this is extraordinary, and I'm pretty sure that I know what you're going to say when every press release, every statement, including the official press release, every journalist says the first African woman to curate the Venice Biennial, and you've had this before. You refer to it as the first and only syndrome when you speak about Ed Zeitsmoker, the first and only. And when you were appointed to Zeitsmoker and you had to address this first and only syndrome, you said something very important. You said, what people don't see is that before you took over, it took 20 years before you could be appointed. And you said you didn't fall from the sky, and Zeitsmoker didn't fall from the sky. I want to start to speak about that history of.
Well, I believe that every environment, particularly if you move fast forward from the early times of humanity that we were just speaking about, every environment is shaped by the people that feed it, you know, and I would love to study genealogy, and I believe in genealogy, and I believe in the fact that nobody falls from the sky. We all have a certain genealogy in whatever we do, and particularly professional genealogies. So I wanted to keep the hubris in check, the entire hubris that was, you know, Zeitsmoker was launched with great fanfare, and rightly so. It was set up, launched in the right way, but at the same time, I mean, Zeitsmoker, the very fact that it is established in Cape Town, in a very complicated African city, if I may call it like that, and at a time when many of us in the field had already worked so hard to fill the voids, and what I called filling the voids, and filling the voids of spaces of expression, spaces of freedom, spaces of making, of production, spaces of really criticality around contemporary art. I mean, there are a few people here. Gabi is sitting here. She's part of that labor for many years. And I was just like, hold on a minute, right? It's fine. We all love you. We all want you. We all want that museum. But I mean, there is an artist in the late 90s called Mesha Gaba who already planned the whole museum as an artwork, right? So I think that, yes, we have to celebrate our achievement, we have to support, we have to think forward, we have to make, but I also like to bring things in perspective, and that whole hubris that was surrounding Zeitsmoker was really about that. So Zeitsmoker didn't come out of nothing. It came out of, after 20 years of intense activity, of many protagonists in the field, on the continent and outside the continent, that prepared the ground for Zeitsmoker to be.
Not just Zeitsmoker, I mean, your appointment at the Venice Biennial also. I would like to, forgive me, I'm going to read a few quotes, which is probably not
From
good.
me?
No. Which is probably not good form in an interview, but I'm going to read these quotes in order that the audience might better understand the phenomenal changes that I'm speaking about of your appointment as curator of the next Venice Biennial. I would like to go back to 1991 to Documenta 9, which was curated by a Belgian, Jan Hout. And in his book, called On the Way to Documenta, he literally writes, how do you react to a kid's drawing? By saying how good it is or beautiful, or maybe by saying that it could use a bit more color, that we better not hang it on the wall, all this from your own information and experience, and from within the love for that child. But actually saying that the drawing is bad, question. We don't really know, but the child's world has no critical apparatus. Something similar happened to me in Africa. In my opinion, Africa is in a state of major transition. But that does not make the dialogue any easier, especially because there is no critical apparatus. Everything is still closely linked to ethnic, cultural backgrounds there. Its people are not striving for that universal capacity I need for Documenta. As a continent, it can still command a variety of things: sentimental, anthropological, sociological interest, etc. Fascinating, witty, crisp narrative moralizing, but I cannot handle that in Documenta. And then Stuart Morgan, in his Freeze review of Documenta, said, quote unquote, after a month in Africa, Jan Hut said he found nothing worth including. In his own words, he met artists who operate in complete isolation. 1991. Documenta 10, the next Documenta, curated by Catherine David, she said, it has become fashionable in the art world to invite artists from Africa and Asia. That is, for the most part, an alibi gesture. In the best case, conformism, or simply just colonialism. I won't be taken in by such exoticism. And then in another article, she's quoted, it says, in her eyes, the fine arts of Africa and Asia do not necessarily play the most interesting role. She wants to avoid showing off, according to Western standards, mediocre art, just to fulfill a quota or satisfy a wish for folklore. Now, the document after that was Okwe, and we'll speak about that. And in the audience, I'd like to invite Simon Njami, who I know since 1990. Simon, could you please take the microphone? And maybe could we put a light? Is it possible to increase the light? Okay. So, Simon, you have witnessed a great many changes to arrive at this moment. I mean, I met you a year before these kinds of statements were made about African art. Do you think anything has changed?
I don't think much has changed. And I love Jan Hut, peace to his soul. I met him in Düsseldorf in the 90s while he was preparing his documenta, and he said exactly what he wrote in that, could we call that a book? Anyway, and I was young then, and I insulted him, and I offered him an issue of a magazine I was doing, and he called. This is why I saved him. He called to ask me for 3 artist details. So, Koyo said everything started in Africa, and I do believe in that. And we good people, I forgive people who don't know, because they don't know. I forgive stupid people. I try to teach them with a bit of love. I try to bring them to the right path. But if we would be busy with all the bullshit that I've been writing, it would take too much energy. It is, for instance, one of the things, and I'll stop there, one of the things I don't like about post-colonial bullshit, etc., etc. While you're deconstructing Europe, you're not constructing elsewhere. So we've always been busy constructing instead of deconstructing the bullshit that die from themselves because they have no sustainability. Jan, this was for you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, let's go back to the beginning. You were born on Christmas Day.
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, yeah. I beat Jesus.
And then you had a Catholic education.
Oh, very much. A Jesuit one.
In Douala.
Yes.
Speak about the woman in Douala.
I can speak about the women in Douala. I can speak about my great-grandmother. I can speak about my grandmother. I can speak about my mother and her sisters. That's what I can speak about. And what can I say? I was born in a family of mainly women. The men were vastly absent, even when they were present. So this has completely formed who I am, starting with my great-grandmother, who was basically a teenage marriage. You know, she was sent off to marriage, to a polygamous marriage at age 13 or 14, something like that. So starting from there, because I don't know anyone beyond her in my lineage, and starting from there, this is how I was socialized. I was raised by extremely powerful, strong women who didn't take anything from anyone, and certainly not from men. I think that this really served me well, you know, in terms of understanding my place and my role in society, and also my relationship to gender, to myself as a woman, but also as anything else, you know, vis-a-vis of me. So, yeah.
And then you moved to Switzerland. So
Yes.
you grew up in Douala, you have a Catholic education, you go to Switzerland, where you were destined to become an investment banker.
Well, my mom will certainly listen to this if you are streaming or recording this. Yes, I was destined to become a banker, but luckily, just in time, I realized that there is something else out there called arts and culture that I really diverted. But yes, I did. I was trained to be a banker at Credit Suisse in Switzerland. That's what you do in Switzerland. You learn either to be a banker, or you learn to make chocolate, or you learn to make cheese, or you learn to make watches. So I choose banking. So, and it served me well up to now, you know. I think that one of the many, amongst many things, one of the things that really endured me in this line of work is that I have a very solid management background on top of curatorial practice, you know.
But then you met two artists, Dominique Rust and Clarissa Herbst, and they somehow inspired you to start to think about this idea of art. And you ended up in journalism, and you made a trip to Senegal, where you met Issam. And this changes everything.
Completely.
Describe, that is an important moment.
It's interesting. Well, there are 300 people here listening to my private life. I'm not sure I want to spill everything. Okay, but you mentioned two very important people. Actually, three very important people, but let's start with these two. Dominique Rust and Clarissa Herbst are a Swiss artist duo. They are still practicing today. I actually visited them 2 weeks ago in Zurich. And I was a young banker back then in Zurich of the late 80s. Boring. You go to bed at 11 p.m. There is no bar open later than 10. So, and it was really also the post-really rebellious movement of what they call the Bewegung, all the work against nuclear power. And there was a lot of activity in Zurich back then. And I was there by random, met these incredible people, artists. I was interested in art, but not really. I didn't know much about it. I just knew that I was drawn to it. I was still kind of a bookworm, so literature was really kind of my line of, guiding. And but visual arts was there, but was not there. So I meet.
But what is the thing about art that suddenly grabbed you?
The space of possibility. Honestly, and I'm still absolutely in awe all the way to today after 30 years of practice. The space of possibilities that art provides, the space of proposition, the space of freedom that art provides, where you can project, reject, inject, where you can really imagine, propose. There is no line of work that gives you that level of freedom and that level of, capacity to inhabit.
Do you think it comes with any form of responsibility?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
On the part of the artist or of the part of the creator?
On the part of
The
everyone.
curator.
On the part of the artist, on the part of the mediator, on the part of the curator, on the part of whoever collects that art. I don't want to say collector, but whoever, takes that in custody and care. It's even a responsibility on the part of the audience, so to speak. I hate that word audience. It's kind of so anonymous. On part of the people who take it in.
So if we open ourselves to art, it is capable of changing a life.
Individually, maybe.
Why do you think it fails so often?
Individually, it has the capacity of transforming you. It has the capacity of really getting you to another space or to another level or to another frame of reference and frame of being, if you want. I mean, for my personal experience, I mean, even before I went to Senegal and met Issam, and even before I met Clarissa and Dominique, there is one person who really played a big transformational role in my life. Is Toni Morrison, just by her books, just reading Toni Morrison. As a young black woman in very white Switzerland back then, reading Toni Morrison has completely changed the way I perceive myself as an African woman in the world and as an African woman in Europe back then and as an African woman in Switzerland. And I think that through that and what happened later really, comforted me and pushed me to understand that I need to go back to the continent. I chose Senegal for other reasons, even though I was born and raised in Cameroon. So I believe in the power of art on an individual level. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the same power on a collective level in terms of really changing society. It's powerful, but it's not powerful enough. There is a level of powerlessness that is inherent to creative practice, to artistic practice, that sort of doesn't necessarily get us there. Visual art, and I will always say it, visual art is less, but poets and writers a little bit more.
So, Koyo Kouoh, curator of the Meli Art, is it Foundation or Institute in Rotterdam. You were the director of the Berlin Biennial, and you said something very interesting in the Berlin Biennial. You spoke about decolonization means creating new configurations of knowledge and power, and it can be a messy procedure. In the world that we're living in, where we're trying to process so much trauma, pain, suffering, trying to understand the insanity that humanity has launched upon itself. How do you think art might be able to, in this messy decolonization that you refer to, help us to recover our humanity?
I don't know anymore. I think there is an honest answer. I don't know anymore. I think I've said many things. I've been hopeful in my life, and I think we can agree that there's a lot of hopelessness and questions that need to be rephrased, and introspection that we need to return to just see what is it that we're doing and how it is transforming ourselves and our society. So yeah, my answer to that is that right now I don't know.
It's good not to know. It's absolutely valid answer, not to know.
But isn't that the space of art? Doubt can exist in art, and through art, by acknowledging not knowing, we can grow, we can heal. Whereas doubt in the world of banking might be dangerous.
I left banking over 30 years ago, so I absolutely don't know what is happening there anymore. I think that, as I was saying earlier, I was drawn to this space of exhibition making, working with artists, and investing in the matters of the spirit, as I call it. Particularly because it provides that space of imagination that banking didn't provide, right? For me, at least. A lot of people see a lot of poetry in finance. I don't see any. And I really believe that sometimes, people want to know what is art and what is not art, what is the role of the artist in society, and so on. I like to think that of two things: what art is and what art does for us in life. It can be the kind of glue that holds you together without you knowing that that's what's holding you together. And that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, the one that I actually like better, is that is an extension of ourselves. Because our lives are not enough. And we need an extension of it. We need a way to remind ourselves of that humanity. We need a space of remembering or leaving a mark. I was talking earlier about scriptures and objects. So I like this idea of art as being an extension of ourselves, as being a space for us to be, and a space for us to deal with complexities that we cannot deal in other kind of factions of being human, so to speak, right? So,
I mean, perhaps the best example of an artist who understood that so well is what I like to think of as the most famous unknown artist, Issam, an extraordinary artist who has escaped, except for a small group of people who give recognition, but he was a big influence on you. And I'd like you to speak about why he's such an important artist, and yet at the same time, why he's escaped recognition.
wow, Issa. Issa is important to me and continues to be important to me in ways that I'm still not able to sort of put in real words, and not even to put in a graspable, understandable frame of understanding for you to get. So let me tell you a story. Stories are always very helpful. I landed in Dakar in, I don't know, October 95, almost 30 years ago, for the first time. And I was sent to Dakar, and I wanted to go to Dakar. Back then, I was still sort of writing a little bit for cultural journals, and I was involved in a group of, cultural and artistic people in Zurich, and we used to reorganize the FESPACO festival, the film festival in Ouagadougou, in Zurich, 6 months after the festival took place in Ouagadougou. Anyway, long story short, I'm going to Senegal to interview, not even Issa. I had no idea about Issam, and I knew, of course, about Djibril Diop Mambéty as a filmmaker, but I had no idea of Issam. So I'm going to Senegal to interview Sembène Ousmane. And Sembène Ousmane was notoriously not talking to journalists and not giving interviews. So I end up there in this little kind of office of Sembène somewhere downtown Dakar, him giving me absolutely no attention and no nothing. And this is how the evening before, I was welcomed by 2 Senegalese artists that I had met before, and that took me to a performance in the courtyard of Issam in Rue Jules Ferry in downtown Dakar. And that was an electrifying moment for me in terms of meeting this incredible human being and being welcomed the way he welcomed me in his space. So while Sembène was giving me no attention whatsoever, I retreated into Issa's courtyard, and I went there, and I had only met him the day before. So I went there, I told him, well, I'm here for Sembène, but Sembène doesn't care and whatsoever. And Issa did the most humane and the most beautiful act ever. He said, sit down, have a glass of water, look at the tree. So I spent an entire afternoon in this studio, courtyard, home, watching this man doing all sorts of acts, leaving, coming, other people coming, conversations starting, unfolding, breaking, and and so on. I've never experienced something like that before. So, and from then on, the rest is history. A couple of months later, I went back to Switzerland and packed and moved to Senegal.
And that process of the social rhizome of what makes a work of art became very much part of your practice.
Absolutely.
When you started the raw material company in Dakar.
Absolutely. Because I think it's first and foremost about people. We are, as much as we are, I think that we are kind of guided and driven by scriptures and objects. I think that what is in between are people. It's first and foremost about people. And this is something that became very, very central to my intellectual, professional development alongside Issam about centering people. I like to say that people are more important than things. We all look at, materiality, we all look at things, but it's first and foremost about people. And I went into curatorial practice and art, not necessarily because I like artworks. No, I actually don't really like artworks. Believe it or not, I like the people who make the artworks. I'm interested in why they are making those artworks. I'm interested in what makes them do what they do. That's what I think, that is the real art.
Do you ever get an answer to that question?
Well, yes, sometimes, because I tend to be extremely faithful in terms of I tend to work with the same artist.
But understanding an artist's mind is a very complicated process.
Well, the thing is that I don't attempt, I don't even try to understand it. All I want is to be around it and to, receive what I can receive and translate what I can translate. So that's what I mean about being at the service of artists. I don't really consider myself like a curator, an exhibition maker. I consider myself an artist servant. I'm there to serve artists, people. The art is collateral.
And then after Senegal, you end up invited to my home country, country of my skull, 2019, and you become the director of Zeit. And you made some interesting statements about Zeit, which is, it's a Pan-African museum, but I think even in the same interview you said Pan-Africanism is a failed idea.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I believe in Pan-Africanism.
You said it's a failed political idea.
Well, it's a failed political... I don't think it's a failed political idea. I think that the expanse and the reach and the scope and the possibilities of Pan-Africanism have not been realized because they have been curtailed, they have been, interrupted, they have been, prevented of its full kind of realization.
But what for you, what means Pan-Africanism?
There are many, the Gavian explanation, the Krugman explanation, there are many. My personal one...
For the audience here, they wouldn't know those references.
Yeah,
so can you try to
Well,
say
I give mine. My understanding of Pan-Africanism is the idea of an incredibly powerful, connected sense of Africa and its diaspora. And in a nutshell, for me, Pan-Africanism is that space of understanding understanding the scope and the power of blackness, and even blackness itself being contested on the continent, but the scope and power of Africanity that has transcended, regions, cultures, geographies, in ways that it is enduring in shaping culture, even outside of Africa, and of course on the continent itself. So, and I fundamentally believe in the collective, communal, and common experience of being black and African in the world, because that's a very particular kind of, let me call it status, if you want. I think it's not the right word, but English is not my native or whatever language. So I am part of that generation of people who grew up. I'm a kid of a boomer, right? The people who were the first kind of elite in those newly independent countries in the late 50s and 60s. And the people who showed us that there is this possibility, or there are these possibilities of autonomy, of independence, of, self, auto kind of generations, if you want. And I grew up in the 70s and in the 80s, where the idea of the expanded idea of Africa was still very strong, and I strongly believe that if we come together, just imagine this, and I'm saying it to you, particularly you, Kendell, because your background on the continent is also in a very
Problematic.
very problematic, but at the same time very interesting, right?
Well,
So
for those of you who don't know, I am an African. My family's been in Africa for 300 years, but I don't look African, but I'm certainly not European. So it's very problematic. I identify as African, and of course, you'd be right to speak to me about something which in Europe we don't speak about, white privilege, which is when we go back to the need, why I needed to go back to those quotes of Katrin David and Jan Hut, is, and we'll speak in a minute about the exhibition that you have at the Bozar, is the process of colonialism is the difference between the ability to speak and the right to speak. And speaking on behalf of somebody else was the colonial process. When a man speaks on behalf of a woman, he deprives that woman of
the
voice,
patriarchal process.
regardless of intention. Even if the man is trying to defend the woman, he is disempowering the woman. And when a white person assumes to know what a black person needs and wants, and decides to impose an education, as in the colonial process, impose a value of faith, it is... Now, one of the problems of being a white person in Africa is there's a structure that is there since before you're born that gives you a privilege to be able to speak and represent yourself, and gives you the right to be able to take certain things for granted.
Well, let me tell you another story, if you want to talk. So you all got my notion of Pan-Africanism. Now we are going to South Africa. It's very interesting. So 5 years ago, when I was appointed at this position in Cape Town, I landed in Cape Town, and I started meeting all sorts of people. And I met one person, a very influential South African. They call them landlords, very, very big-time billionaires of South Africa. And one of the things that this person told me is that his family is there since 1444, that he is African, white man, no problem. I personally have no problem with that problematic, but the real problem, I think, is...
These are historical facts.
These are historical facts. You know, nobody can be sent back to Holland.
But I think you're questioning the conclusion.
You know, or to the UK. 500 years, 300 years, well, you're there. But the point is, you come in to a land that works with so much generosity, that works with so much hospitality, that works with so much sense of the other, and so much sense of care. The thing is that even after 300 or 400 years, Kendell, there are very few white South Africans who consider themselves African, unless they want to make money of whatever marketing, whatever African thing they want to promote. That's a fact.
I can tell you,
You know?
for
me, and I think that the real problem in all settler colonies in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe included, Zambia and everywhere else, South Africa, of course, being kind of the crown jewel, so to speak, in that conversation, is the day you live up and own up to your Africanity, you will see that things will change.
I have a horrible anecdote. I remember as a young anti-apartheid activist, I ended up in exile. I was on trial for treason. And I recall the most fascinating thing. I never saw so many white anti-apartheid activists after apartheid that were never there before. But I have a question for Nicolas Bourriaud, since we're speaking about these complexities of history, politics. So, Nicolas, when you curated the Tate Triennale, and you had this concept of ultra-modernism, and I think in the catalogue you said something quite extraordinary. You spoke about modernism, and you said in ordinary language, modernization has come to mean reducing cultural and social reality to Western formats. And today, modernism amounts to a form of complicity with colonialism and Eurocentrism. Could you expand upon that?
Well, in general, we tend to underestimate our capacity to make things evolve, I would say. Talking about identity, for example, I don't believe in identity as a very interesting subject, neither for myself nor for art, for one reason. Because it's a difference between the radical and the radicant, actually. A radical is the very root of a tree, for example. When you erase everything, you have the radical. The radicant grows its own roots while advancing. Its identity is not behind us. Behind us is our belongings. Identity is ahead of us. It's something you might attain, but for myself, I still didn't. It's the same actually for this idea of alter modernism. I think it's very possible to, and I see that in artists' works, to rediscuss, not a new modernism, because that would be absolutely stupid. It's not at all what it means. It means a new possibility of dialogue, a new possibility of conversation, actually, around shared values that are still in front of us, not behind. And that's a really important thing here.
Nicolas Schaffhausen, in your recent exhibition that you created at the Deichtorhalle in Hamburg, Survival in the 20th Century, one of the statements you say is how 21st century. How can we rethink the economy, build, live, and eat differently, use technology for humanity in new ways, learn from non-Western societies? What can we learn from non-Western societies?
Actually, it's a definition what is a non-Western societies. I want to come back to you, Kouoh, when you said that you believe your entry to art was the belief in people. We share this. For me, it was not about art for art. It was the artist, specific people I entered in. For me, it was, by the way, Kraftwerk and Isa Gensken. As someone, we are the same age, same generation, and I believe in people and in place. And the place where you are coming from, at least let's say, the first 10, 20 years of your life, you only know your place, more or less. Yeah, I've been well traveled as a kid, but you really belong to a place, and that creates lots of problems. And for me, it's a little response. What you said, the place of freedom is art and the people, or the artists. I believe. I still believe that, but this is called into question. And for me, in the past 10 years, this is how I came. The initial title of that exhibition, for the Deichtorhallen. Deichtorhallen is a very hugely funded institution in Hamburg, and they invite people like me, like they invite people like you, or known curators for one reason, known for that specific for a specific context, and you get instrumentalized. This exhibition was planned in a very difficult time of globally, but in Germany itself, free speech got politically called into question after the last documenta. So also exhibition making as well. And then I got into it's my co-curator in that conflict when the Israeli-Gaza war started. And I got in the midst of, I don't know if you're familiar with Strike Germany. We invited plenty of Israeli, Palestinian, but before the war started, and indigenous artists from North America where I have been working before. So as learning from people, learning from place. And that, I'm not sure if we can, that would be my question to you. If they, no. Learning from, is it still possible to curate? I don't want you to talk about Venice, but to curate, being an artistic director of a global event and guarantee the freedom of speech with art. You know, I know it's a very I don't expect an answer, but this is, I think, what we all share. This is why we started.
But I'll give you one. I'll give you one. I think that, okay, I'll certainly not talk about Venice, but to answer you, Nicolaus, I think that biennials, most of the biennials in our frame of work are still very interesting platforms for me. Are still the places where you can play. Because at the end of the day, it's also about playing. And Venice, most biennials give you carte blanche. So I will use my carte noire.
Yeah, this is why I said you can be happy not working in Germany, not doing documenta. So that it's good that you do Venice.
Zoe Gray, speaking of exhibitions, senior curator, is that senior curator at the Bozar? Is that the title?
Head of exhibitions.
Head of exhibitions. So you are hosting this marvelous exhibition that I hope everybody will go and see when we see us opening in a few days. Could you explain, give some few words as to what led to you deciding to invite Koyo to do this exhibition at the Bozar?
So when I began at Bozar as part of Christophe Slagmulder's new team, Christophe and I visited the spaces, the gallery spaces, which was the first time I'd seen them empty, despite having visited Bozar for many years. And I saw this enormous, enormous space of possibility. And I thought, what are we going to do here? We don't have a collection. We can show whatever we like. Who do we want to play with? Who do we want to inject into this institution, into this city? Who do we want to talk with? And I think it was really one of the first curatorial meetings we had with my team. And Anna Yudong, who's one of the people who's coordinating now the Bozar version of this show that Koyo and Tandazani have curated, she said, well, there's this show at the moment, and it's in Zeitz-Mokka, and it sounds amazing. And I thought, yes, it does sound amazing. So we tried to get hold of the curators and convince them that they should bring it to Brussels. I think, I knew of Koyo by reputation for many years. Our paths had crossed when I was at Wheels and she did her amazing body talk show. And I knew that it would be an excellent show of excellent work. When I saw the catalogue and when I saw the Basel version of the show, I was even more convinced that that was the case. It is really joyous, it is really intelligent, it's really playful, it's highly political and yet not explicitly political, and I think that's a very clever balance that the curators have struck. It was also in part because I found, if we go back to Venice questions, when I saw the Ralph Rogoff curated edition of Venice, I forget which year it was.
2019.
Thank you. There was quite a lot, by Venice standards, of black figurative painting, mainly by African Americans. And I remember the criticism from some quarters, which was this was very politically correct, it was market-driven, it was a fashion, it was a fad. And I thought that was really irritating, but I didn't have enough background knowledge to talk down those detractors and to say, no, hang on, no, there's an enormous history here. But luckily, there are experts who do have that knowledge. And I think that this exhibition is very important because it shows an enormous range of amazing work, but it also shows a historical perspective, which is key. It's 100 years of black figuration. And we see how that has meant different things in different places across the African continent and beyond in the diaspora. It's a big call for one show, but I think it makes an extremely good start in broadening up my knowledge, and if it broadens my knowledge, it will broaden other people's knowledge.
The title of the exhibition, When We See Us, is taken from the Netflix series from Ava DuVernay's When They See Us, which is a horrific series. I urge you all to watch it. It's horrible. It is one of the most complicated, difficult. It tells the story of these kids, and I say kids as in
They were
these
kids,
children.
teenage kids.
14 years old, 15 years
And
old.
not that long ago, 1985, 86, 87, it's like yesterday.
And they were in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong color skin, accused of brutally raping a jogger in Central Park. The police extracted confessions from them, which were brutally extracted. They were children who confessed to things they did not do, ended up going to jail. Trump took out a full-page ad in the New York Daily News saying, "Bring back the death penalty," in which he speaks about roving band of wild animals. And they were all innocent. They were all falsely accused. They've all since been released. And the Netflix series, I urge you to watch it. Now, why did you choose to title it after that series?
Well, first of all, I like to imagine exhibition titles that takes their cue from other works. It's my way of, bringing reference. I like Ava DuVernay's work in ways that it is really bringing another very interesting voice into the narrative of black experience in the world. So the other level for choosing, for flipping basically, because Ava's work is about when they see us. And I flipped the whole conversation about when we see us. It was also to really flip the dialectic and really occupy a space of agency and occupy a space also like my older brother and amazing Cameroonian thinker Achille Mbembe talks about self-writing, the way of imprinting yourself into the narrative of your being. And also a way, the way Achille puts it is that to really liberate ourselves from the prison that, slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, and so on, has locked the black imaginary to a certain extent. So by really just making that flip from they to we reclaim that space and we own that space of self-agency. And on another level is also about, there is this sense of, at some time in the 2010, I was talking a lot about advocacy curating. I don't know if we will get about that. And the advocacy literature of the 60s and 70s coming from the continent. The idea that you constantly have to show to yourself or to the dominant narrative that you are not what they think you are. I mean, Gabi is here. She used a form of that for her 10th Berlin Biennial as a trick, you know, linguistical and intellectual trick. And so using when we see us was also speaking to ourselves and taking that authority, like Miles used to do. Miles used to play to people turning his back to his audience. And I think that we have to do it even more.
But you did more than just turn the back in this exhibition, because you're speaking about black joy and happiness, a century, and yet it is the most violent century for black people. And it's interesting that you focusing on the joy and the happiness rather than the suffering, the trauma, the enslavement, the colonialism.
We are tired.
Tired of?
All of that. That doesn't mean that it is not active and that we should not work on it. But I just think that I wanted to take a break of the usual tropes, because the usual tropes are what gets me out of bed. The usual tropes are what really, you know, gives me energy and, you know, fighting power. But at the same time, I mean, I live on the continent. I see so many other levels of being and of relating that are so beautiful, that are so enduring, that are so powerful, that are so incredibly strong and smart and interesting and everything that you want, that really I wanted to inhabit that space through an exhibition as well.
Sorana Muncia, is that how you say? You're from the Congolese community in Brussels. Now, this is an interesting question. Are you also tired? Do you feel the same fatigue of the burden of history? So for instance, what do we do with the colonial monuments? Do we tear them down in Brussels? Do we rework them?
What do we do with the colonial monuments? Wow. It's a long story, and it's a long... in my practice as a curator, I'm really close to the social struggles and what's going on with the African community in Brussels, in Belgium. And I'm more involved also in the dialogue that we are trying to have with institutions in general. So I would say that personally, I think that we really need to make a strong gesture with those monuments. But I'm not really interested in saying, okay, should we put them down or not? I think that we should, but I think it's a debate that can take so many hours and so many days, and that's what we are doing right now. But I think that the most important thing for me here with when we talk about the relationship between black people who live in Belgium or in Europe in general, let's say the African diaspora, in the cultural field and also in the struggle, let's say the social struggle, what is important for me is how we are trying to protect ourselves in terms of what we say and what we don't say, what we show and what we don't show. That notion of opacity, you know, because I think that what is asked from, let's say, the creative from Africa or from another background than Belgium or Europe is to explain themselves, to say, to go deep in themselves. We want to, let's say that what it's asked is to see inside of us. And that's why also I really love the title of your exhibition, Koyo, When We See Us, because when we see us, it means also how do we take ourselves very seriously. How do we accept our contradictions that are sometimes not explainable, you know? When I was thinking of your exhibition and the work that you are doing this morning, I was thinking about Black joy, because it's something that you say a lot when you talk about this work, this exhibition, and I couldn't help myself than thinking about Alamine Bangura, who was a young African man who died in 2018, suffocated by 8 policemen in his house because he didn't pay his rent. From there started a struggle, let's say a debate, not a debate, but like a battle between the family with the help of the community and the institutions, the police, the justice institutions. And it's only three years after that they could take the body back and could organize a dignified burial. And at that moment, when we buried him, there was a lot of joy. The joy of having him back, even though he was dead. The joy of burying him, the joy of being together. And then I was like, wow, Black joy is really happening in very strange spaces, strange places. And you cannot explain that. You cannot explain why in Kinshasa we go to the funerals to have drinks, to see people, you
dance
know,
and
that's
laugh.
the place to be. That's the place to be. You know, you go to at the funerals to have fun. How can you explain that Black joy? You cannot explain that. So let's say that I'm really interested in the opacity, in the right of silence, in the right of we take ourselves very at a level of seriousness that we cannot share it. We just have to live it, you know. So that's what I understand with when we see us.
Thank you very much. I think we're coming to an end because I feel shuffling going on in the audience. We could go on for hours. We certainly could. But I would like to finish with something which is really important for me, which is actually to go back to the very beginning. Both your beginning, but the beginning of the talk. So when I curated the exhibition Incarnations of the Bozar, some of my favorite objects in the exhibition were the Mupo Bamileke from Cameroon. And these are small little objects which are extremely important because in the community what happens is that the healer, who's also the artist, makes this little sculpture to give to the person, to carry it around with them in their pocket or in their body. And the work of art is the medicine, which is just an extraordinary way to think of the power of art to transform, the power of art. And there was an interesting discussion that you had referring to an artist, a dear friend of ours, an artist called Tracy Rose, who I wanted to speak to you about the art market, but I think we're not going to be able to speak about that tonight, and branding. And Tracy is one of those artists who, like Issam, who are extraordinary artists who don't end up in the art market because they don't fit the idea of what the market is looking for. And Tracy said there are so few people around the world that understand the power of art, not the financial power, but the resonance. And you reacted and you said something quite extraordinary. You said if people understood the power of art, there'd be less wars.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Can you speak about the power of art to go back to this question of how can art negotiate our humanity in the moment we're living in right now, which is just insane?
I like stories. And I tell a story that happened yesterday. I arrived in Brussels yesterday. And before I got here, I was very anxious about all different kinds of things. And I haven't been in an art space or in a gallery for like a week. and entering the exhibition space immediately put me at ease. So I strongly believe that of the power of art on an individual level, not on a collective level. And I strongly believe in the possibility of individual transformation through the spirit that is conveyed through artworks. And artworks have vehicles. That's why I like to say that these are collaterals. It's about the spirit, it's about the people, it's about the love, it's about the labor, it's about the time that is put into an artwork that, of course, is commodified and sold and collected. All that is absolutely important and good. Collectors in the room, don't take me wrong. I respect you, and you do a very important work for artists. But what I want to say is that Bamileke sculpture or piece of work that you referred to, it really brings back to, the idea of this totality of artistic practice that artists like Issam and Tracy have and understood. And it's not necessarily something that you learn. And that's the beauty of it. It's something that you inhabit, that is within you, that is given to you. It's like a gift. People call it talent. It's not talent, it's a gift. Certain people are given that gift and others are not. So, and when you extrapolate it and bring it back to the really Negro-African understanding of society making and of humanity, and you were always a total artist. I mean, the idea of only being a painter, or only being a writer, or a poet, only being a dancer, only being this, is absolutely alien in the Negro-African kind of cosmos of creative practice. You have to do everything. It is through this capacity, and it's not merely because of, being multidisciplinary, this very contemporary or postmodernist word of understanding artistic practice. No, it's not about multidisciplinarity. It's about interdependency. It's about the fact that what you do here connects to there, and bringing that together create a space and a realm of existence. That's what I understand art to be.
Well, I think I understand the interdisciplinariness of it. I'm an artist. This is my work of art. I'm bringing us into a discussion. So thank you all very much. What a wonderful evening. And if I may summarize the discussion, art changes the world, one perception at a time.
One person at a time.